We're very pleased to welcome Frank Barich, President and Principal Consultant for Barich, Inc., one of the premier airport consulting companies in North America. He has been in the industry for over 30 years and is a member of a number of industry committees. Most notably, he's participating in the ACI North America Industry Recovery Panel. Frank's going to take a look at the pandemic response in North America and the challenges they face and the steps they are taking to address the new normal. So with further ado, as they say, welcome to Frank, and very many thanks for participating. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Chris. Well, greetings, and thank you all for joining this session. For the next few minutes, I want to talk about three driving factors that we have noticed that have begun to help improve operational readiness at airports, but also financial resilience. These being a focus on virtual queuing, we'll talk a bit about that, a future of common use, and digital transformation. Before I do, though, I'm going to take a step back very briefly, look at where we were and where we are today. That will help set the stage for the discussion that will follow. No surprises here. Looking back at the beginning of 2020, we entered it with a bang, and no one was expecting what February/March had for us. And we saw significant decreases, as did the world, in our airline traffic and our airports. Fortunately for us, our U.S. government back then provided a $58 billion relief package, helped tremendously with the business of our airlines and keeping things afloat. Similar in our airports, we saw the same thing. March, 50% drops in our airports, and we thought that was bad. We didn't expect April, which of course hit 96%. So where are we today? Since mid-February, and even today, we have been averaging over 1 million passengers a day through our TSA checkpoints. That's significant. The mark here that I show on March 7th of 1.27 million a standard day, whereas prior to the pandemic in 2019, same day, 2.1. That gives a 50 to 60% increase, or back to resumption. Those numbers are growing, although steadily, not very rapidly, but they are growing. So we're showing a good resumption right now going into this year. Along with that, our airlines. This quote, airlines are adding flights in a frenzy. And they are. They're trying multiple different locations. Several examples here, Southwest Airlines, since the pandemic, and to now have announced or begun 17 new airport locations. JetBlue, Spirit, Allegiant, all more than 3 airport locations each. And these numbers at airports and airlines are growing. This is a steady group. ACI North America recently did a survey, and the questions, of course, were based on U.S. airport resumption. Most of these fairly standard that you'll see across the globe. What I want to draw to your attention, though, 2 items that I think are significant for this discussion, and that being touchless technology. Notice the green for under consideration versus blue, yes, I've done something. In the area of touchless technology and really the pandemic technologies, we're thinking more than we're deploying yet. And occupancy limitations, same idea. We know we have a problem coming and we're thinking about it, but we haven't done as much. And those 2 items are the reasons why I wanted to pick the 3 that we were going to be talking about. At the onset of the pandemic, ACI North America initiated a special panel, a special working group, the Airport Industry Recovery Advisory Panel, known as AIRAP. AIRAP consists of the 13 committees within ACI that represent airport operations and, of course, the stakeholders around that. I'm a representative on the business information technology side, along with CIO from Phoenix. Each committee provides 2 members, along with the executives of ACI. We had 4 primary missions or points to do with this committee. Immediately, of course, help to minimize the spread. What can we do immediately? Promote confidence in our air travel, ensure consistency so that our passengers could see the same thing regardless of where they travel throughout the US and throughout North America. This includes Canada. Streamlining the recovery of air travel. As we grow, how do we streamline it? Immediately, one of our recommendations that we did was produce this report, copy of the front page is there for you, but this report provided recommendations to our legislative governments as to funding and things that we needed from them, along with high-level general recommendations for airports to follow. Medium term, we started forming specific groups designed for adaptation, designed for helping to recover. The virtual queuing working group is one that I'll mention here in a minute. And our long term, we continue this working group, AIRAP. We continue the panel. It's focused on now resiliency through recovery and the long-term resumption issues. Virtual queuing. From the onset, we had this idea. Several airports came in and said, even if I get to 30% recovery, I am anticipating lines out the door. Several had done models, Seattle being one of those, and they've been able to put the test those models, and indeed the queuing does reach the door. This was a concern. So our premise was, could we develop a well-integrated system that passengers through a single app could access all queuing throughout our airports and be provided important information, not only for queuing, but for whatever the issues might be. That's where the virtual queuing working group came from. Our mission, when we immediately began looking into this, we recognized that our industry solutions weren't ready for our industry. There really wasn't an off-the-shelf solution that could handle the complexity of virtual queuing at airports. We looked into related industries in this area, theme parks, commercial environments, and although they had solutions, the complexity that we have in our airports, there just simply wasn't going to handle it. Multiple queues, multiple stakeholders, varying uses of those queues at varying times of the day. This was a complex environment. So the first thing we did as a working group was we defined minimum requirements and guidelines so that we could submit these to our airports and say, as you begin to look at virtual queuing, here are the issues that we've got to be aware of. We also provided these guidelines to those solution providers that were beginning to bubble up to the top so that we could start working with them and helping to mature their product line for what we airports need. And of course, we continue to work with the airport operators. There are significant reasons why we want this to be successful. First and foremost is providing effective queue management for health monitoring. In other words, as people enter the queues, not only for the space distancing requirements, but we might have to provide testing as they enter the queues. We might have to validate credentials, things that we knew were coming, but we didn't want to delay the queuing process. So that was important. Won't go through each of these. They're here for your review. I will bring to your attention item number 5, though, improving the business value. Clearly, deploying a system versus construction to enhance the lengths of queuing areas, the costs there were significantly different. Relax customers. If we can help them through the queues and they're relaxed, they naturally spend more. Plenty of studies have shown that. But can we be more active? Could we redirect passengers to customer areas like food courts or stores? And could we provide service offerings through virtual queuing that would allow boutique solutions to go to the front of the line, if you will? Also, virtual queuing had to learn analytics. We do something every Wednesday. This can't be a surprise every Wednesday. We had to provide a system that would learn and data sharing. For example, if there's an irregular operations at a hold room, a delayed flight with an incoming flight, and now the hold room was getting crowded, virtual queuing should be able to tell the passengers, hey, we're not going to send you through the queue line yet. Have another cup of coffee on us while we clean up your hold room and get it ready for you. So many advantages, but also challenges in virtual queuing. And we're addressing each of these today. Of course, changing passenger behavior is not easy. We've learned that from the theme parks. You may add virtual queuing, but that may not stop them from congregating in the area you didn't want them to congregate. So understanding that, understanding the physical difficulties in each airport and how we could deploy a system that would accommodate those physical difficulties. Understanding the virtual queuing solution provider makeups. These non-aviation queuing solutions are aligning with aviation specialty groups. We have to understand what their solutions are and how they apply to us. And then as we resume, the complexities grow. The queuing dynamics is not easy. We can't have manual processing. Automation is critical. So where are we today? There's virtual queuing happening today in Montreal and Denver. Montreal has had one for years where they provide a boutique solution. In effect, you could, through their website, sign up for the front of the line. And when you arrive at your prescribed time, you go to the front of the line. Denver using a similar solution, but now for health conscious passengers. Pretty effective solution today, where you can sign up, and if you have those health issues, you can go through a more secure environment and get on a more secure bus. Both of these are great solutions, but they work with a single line. And if they're oversold, that single line becomes as bad as the line next to them. And if they're undersold, those people in the other line want to know why they can't get in that line. So there are challenges. For those reasons, Seattle and Boston have just begun a pilot program where through the pilot programs, they're looking at a more robust virtual queuing. How can I look at my queuing across different locations? And how can I optimize my queues and perhaps flatten the curves? And that's what's important. Maybe I don't eliminate the curve, but I flatten it. And I create an operational environment that is beneficial. Seattle has a 120-day program. Two solution providers have been selected for the pilot program. Boston has one. These are going to be important to us to see how those programs come through. Other places like Edmonton are looking at pilot programs this year. The VQWG in the bottom right, the Virtual Queuing Working Group, continues. We continue to work with our solution providers and helping them, and also maintaining the active interest in these areas. Reach out to me if you have questions on that group. I'm going to shift gears. Common use. So virtual queuing is active. We see great potentials and programs in. Common use is something that's been around for quite a while, but change. An industry watchword of 2020, I think, is also one for 2021. I showed how those airlines are adding flights and reducing flights. It's imperative that we're able to start and stop activities quickly and easily. Common use has provided that for us. But now, to even more aspects, what we're seeing in the US is not a growth first in our business traffic, but more in our leisure traffic. And that's important, because how the airlines address leisure travelers with dynamic signage, with what they do with the leisure traveler, is different than the business traveler. And having the ability to accommodate that is important. So we're seeing an increased move to common use. Clearly, it's a trend. And there are nice trends involved in that. Air carriers that used to be strongly against that, especially some US legacy carriers, those walls are breaking down, and they're breaking down quickly. We're seeing also a changing of the guard. These newer air carriers coming in, they don't understand why they don't like common use. The other carriers, I can move into an airport quicker. I have a quicker startup. I don't have to consume a full gate, and it's less cost to me. What's the problem? So these airports are becoming, and airports in the US, throughout the world, Canada is a good example. Common use is very prevalent in all the airports. In the US, it's not quite as that, but our US airports are becoming more and more aware of the advantages. And the common use model is expanding. Offsite check-in has become important again. And across the globe, Hong Kong is looking at a significant growth in offsite curbside check-in. Obtaining operational space is the fundamental issue. How do I improve my operational space before passengers arrive and get into my check-in hall, and enhancing that customer service while I do it? Common use provides those solutions. Self-bag drop, growing in the US. There's not a new design construction project that's not deploying self-bag drop. In effect, every element of common use that facilitates flexibility is on the table. And that's a good thing. And it's a growing thing. The common use offerings are changing. I'll speak to that a little bit in this next item that we're going to talk some on, and we're going to spend some time on, and that's digital transformation, a buzzword that's been in our industry for quite some time. But the growth of digital transformation is tremendous right now. And the biggest reason why we're seeing that is because of the new regulatory pressures. Now, regulatory groups, legislative groups, TSA, CBP, and those around the globe are driving digital transformation for their needs. And we see this growth of airport stakeholders. With the health credentials, some of these are traditionally not airport stakeholders. We'll talk about some of those in a minute. But the opportunities are tremendous, as they have been. The information sharing between business to business to commerce, or business to customer, and business to government, a growing trend there. The industry adoption of data sharing across this. And when we talk about data sharing, what we need to do now is share data across disparate systems. And we have to do it effectively. We have to introduce a new system into the ecosystem, and we do it quickly. Digital transformation allows that to happen. We can change quicker. We can enhance our operational effectiveness. We can enhance our security if done properly. Before I get to some trends that we want to be aware of, here are some of the examples. We've all heard about the health credentials. Singapore Airlines is reported to be the first right now in the world airline to pilot IATA's Travel Pass mobile application for digital verification. The bottom line is, how do I create digital information that moves with the passenger, now from the point of when the vaccination happens to testing at various locations, from airport A to airline to connecting airports to airport B. And each one of these need to know that the information that is coming with the passenger is approved, is valid, and is accepted in the final destination. This is significant. It is complex information. IATA, ICAO, ACI World, we're all working on it. We're all trying to create this digital travel credential that will travel with them. Along with that, we're seeing it in other ways, from home to gate, from curb to gate. We used to call it the seamless journey, and now we've expanded that seamless journey to include that. Digital policy is a means of providing data standards and information that allows flexibility at the curbside. And it allows an airport collaborative decision-making process that expands out. If I have a cruise line that is late and I have a busload of passengers coming from that cruise line, and 7 of those passengers need to get on airline XYZ, and airline XYZ needs to know that before the bus arrives so that they can make decisions on that, whether to hold their flight or to reschedule those passengers even before they arrive at the airport. This is important information, and the idea of creating digital standards that allow that to happen across the ecosystem, expanding out to home and to curb. Not only that, but it develops data revenue opportunities, because I can dynamically allocate different locations throughout my airport for different services and meet and accommodate the needs at the time. Really good stuff. And also the industry activities. Here in the US, the security screening, CBP and TVS are working together now to bring their digital identity verification systems together. There's pilot programs at the security gates, but there's pilot programs for us at the domestic level, along with international level, at the check-in and bag drop systems. TSA is piloting 2 programs right now for domestic validation of the passengers, which will move to an agentless program. Very important to our airlines, very important to the process. And as we move these biometric identity checks that travel from the bag drops to the security points, out to entry and exit, and that information passes on, it creates an environment that is more seamless and customer service oriented for our customers, along with the security and the integration issues. I mentioned common use is changing. Common use moving to the cloud-based services. We can no longer afford the 90-day lead times it takes for an airline to certify a change with a common use solution provider. Now that's extensive, but there's still long lead times. So can we use our digital transformation in the cloud to verify these changes quickly? Can we use digital twin technologies to move the physical environment of each style of airport into the digital world, where that can verify those changes and push out to the physical world quickly? ACI World ACRIS is working with our solution providers on digital twin technology solutions in those areas. That's great stuff. And we're seeing emerging best practices that we have to pay attention to. For airports, let's bring it home. For the technical architecture, we have to create a technical architecture ready to provide disparate systems that can communicate across the platforms and across the ecosystems. ACI World ACRIS has developed the semantic model that allows that in our aviation industry, so that different systems can link in effectively and share information between them. API, the more we move our solutions to an API-based management system, the better we are, and in the cloud native solutions. Some of these, establishing the data trust frameworks. That's process and data. And of course, establishing training and security. All of these are best practices that are growing, that are coming into our airport environments that we need to be aware of. There are challenges. Privacy is an incredible challenge that we're facing. And that's why we're moving the digital information to the individual to be able to handle the privacy regulations that we see in different areas around the globe. Accountability and transparency is important. And that middle bullet there, the lack of standards, we've got to improve our standards across the industry, and the trust frameworks. I can provide a technology solution, but before I do that, I have to establish trust frameworks between entity A and entity B to share data. That's a process issue, and that's a significant time consuming. And the operational frameworks, what information do I hold? What information do I exchange? So all of this is important. All of these are challenges that we're facing today. I want to close with this. There are groups out there that I encourage all of us to be a part of. ACI World, ACRIS, IATA, ICAO, the ACI-IATA Next program. These things are good issues, and these align with industry standards that are out there, ISO, the web consortiums and others. So they bring industry standards in and they align our aviation world. They're good for information. They're good for getting involved with. Tomorrow, I'm with the IATA One ID expert program on the biometric credentialing. We're going to be talking about the best the business models that are needed for that. These are active, so I encourage you on each of these. The one that I mentioned that I failed to mention in the group, and that has to do with common use. That is, as common use is working through the Airport Cooperative Research Program, we are writing the new common use guidelines. I don't have that on this slide. The easiest way to remember is trb.org. And from there, you can get to ACRP, the Airport Cooperative Research Program. But I thank you for the time, and you can reach out to me or ask any questions on this. I'd like to turn it back over to you, Chris.
Frank, thank you so much. You covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time there. Really interesting to see how the step changes that US airports are contemplating to build greater resilience in the infrastructure and systems. Fascinating stuff. We do have some time for a few questions. We've had one from the floor here now. Actually, this was on my mind too. Will virtual queuing really solve the space limitations we have at airports? At peak times, where would we put the people anyway?
Right. It's a tough question. When we first started looking at that, we had the concept that maybe we could eliminate queues. And we quickly realized that we couldn't. We had to look at the models that would help flatten the queues and where to put the people and come up with very creative ways of doing so. Some of our airports are well designed to handle it. You think of those airports that have a lot of the commercial activities before the checkpoint. They're better prepared and they can accommodate by moving people. The best thing that we can do on this, and to answer your question, is I don't think it will solve the full problem without adjustments to other locations, because you're absolutely right. In the reality, at the peak moments, how do I maximize it? What we're looking at is trying to work with the main airlines that cause those peaks so that we can flatten. If we can bring passengers in ahead of time and give them incentives to show up an hour early so that we take them out of those peak curves, put them in when I can accommodate them and handle them. The tool allows us to think creatively that way. Can we move passengers to local restaurants and things where we can bring them in when they're needed? So the best thing that I would say is begin looking at these policies, looking at these ideas, and the tool can really help us to flatten those curves.
Great answer. Thanks, Frank. Another one here. Do you foresee the push for digital transformation continuing beyond the pandemic recovery? So is this here to stay?
I do. And the reason why is because we have a different pusher, if you will. The jurisdictional issues, the TSA, CBP, those around our globe, they are far more active in not only moving to a digital transformation, but moving in a way that standards and interoperability can be achieved. We've not had that level of active involvement before. So I think beyond the pandemic, you will see that some of the things that we will do this year and the initiatives that we will make will actually stick, and the frameworks that we'll build will begin to grow. So I that might be a shining light of what we have gone through over the last year, that we'll be able to achieve what we want to.
We have time for one last question, I think. Do you see a common standard coming out for vaccination information, health passports for the traveling public? Seem to be a number of different initiatives around the world at the moment.
Yeah, and I've heard that question several times. The reality is, I think eventually, not immediately, and it may not be anytime soon. What we have to do is learn how to share information between our systems to build the trust and to build towards it. What IATA has done with their OneID and the digital framework and really building the scenarios around trust and pushing the information to the passenger, I think that's a good approach. I think we'll see that our standards build around that. In between, I know that around the world we're working on the bubbles, and through those, I think we'll start emerging some standards. The good news is we're learning how to share information, and that's where we'll start, I think.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I'll just take one more question. Actually, we've had a flurry of questions from the floor. One last question. So far, airport schedules have not taken social distancing into account, with several flights arriving and departing at the same time. This becomes an issue for airports who must try to address this. Do you see this changing?
Yeah, we clearly are beginning to see the pressures of it. And some of our airports, especially in the Florida area, where we've seen 70% recovery, they're coming out and saying, I cannot maintain the social distancing issues. If we're serious about this, we really have two different things that will happen in front of us. One, our memories will fall short and we'll look the other way and forget why it's important. We don't want that. We want to fight through this. So I think you will all experience the curve of the influx. How do we accommodate it? Again, virtual queuing gives us the opportunity of changing this long term. If we can change our business process on how we put people into queues, how we move them through it, it will help get there. But if we're not careful, the social distancing issues and those things around it will fall by the wayside for a little bit. I think we're determined to not let that happen, though.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. One thing I might suggest on it, I'm sorry, is look at your queuing. The linear queues, we can maintain social distancing better than we can with the switchbacks. So there are things we can do physically that can help that.
Okay, so we're right out of time. There are a couple more questions, and as I've said previously, very happy to take these questions, pass them over to Frank, consolidate them, and then circulate them either later on in the seminar or after the summit has been completed. But just remains for me to thank Frank again for that insightful session. Always a pleasure to hear your perspective on the market trends in the US.
Thank you. I know.